Hi, my name is Chris Ridding. This is the Learning Loop podcast. And the thing that we're going to do in today's episode is we're going to show you how to start from scratch with Learning Loop because maybe you've seen another video where I talked about being able to program yourself or being able to design your thoughts or being able to stop forgetting what matters most or being able to act much more reliably. I don't know. There are lots of different framings of Learning Loop, and I've made lots of different videos kind of pitching them. And maybe you've been compelled by those, and maybe you're here and you're thinking, okay, sounds good, but everything you've shown me is so confusing that I would actually never start Learning Loop because how could I? Because look at your notes, they're insane. So that's the problem that I'm trying to solve for you today, is taking you through that process. And I just want to acknowledge off the bat, it makes sense. It makes sense to be overwhelmed. It makes sense to be confused. I've been at this for, like, depending on how you count, anywhere from 5 to 20 years. And so when you look at my notes, I can see how they'd be very, very confusing. But, I want you to watch for the next 10 minutes or 15 minutes or however long this takes. And I want you to walk away thinking, okay, I know what to try. I know what to do first in order to give this thing a go. So before getting into specifics of like Learning Loop mechanics or whatever, I want to get 100% clear about what functional learning loop looks like. It looks like you writing and organizing a set of notes that you use to live better, acting better, and thinking better than you would have if you didn't have those notes that you'd organized. So it's like a user manual. It's like a book of scripture. It's like the book that you wrote for you. It can be long, it can be short, it can be physical, it can be digital, but it's this artifact that you use in order to act and think better, and it's created by you and for you. So long as you're writing down your wisdom, you're organizing that wisdom for yourself, and you're using that wisdom to make different decisions, change the way you're thinking, remember what you need to remember, you're doing Learning Loop. So similarly, if you're trying it and it's not making things go better for you, if you're not making better decisions, if you're not liking the way that you think more, I would say that it's not working. Bless you. My dog just sneezed. I would say that it's not working. And there's a good chance that the reason that it's not working is because you're not keeping the principles that we discuss on this podcast, or you're not avoiding the pitfalls that we discuss on this podcast. And the whole point of the podcast and the whole project of me being out here talking about this is to talk about how to make it as easy as possible and how to avoid all of the same painful traps that I committed as I was getting started in Learning Loop 5 years ago. So as you start, I'm going to discuss some of the primary principles and pitfalls. Principles to follow, pitfalls to avoid. The first pitfall is letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. Remember that with Learning Loop, it's very outcome focused. And so if it's working, then it's making you feel better, it's making you act better. And if it's not, then it probably isn't working. It's natural to feel uncertain and confused about what to do because you're seeing somebody else who's relatively advanced do it, and you're thinking, I could never do that. I could never make my notes look exactly like this. This is way too complicated. This is too much. And I want to make a case that if you're just starting out, we can get your notes like very useful and very functional right off the bat. Like very, very quickly. And just kind of, we can ignore all the notes that I've made in the videos that I've put out on how to use those notes and why they're useful for me. And we can instead focus on your notes, the kind of person you are, and make Learning Loop work for you so that you start remembering the things that you want to remember and acting the way you want to act and doing the things you want to do. So I'm going to break this down into two cases. The first case is like you're not sold on this and you're willing to maybe try it out. You're willing to try and experiment, but you don't necessarily think this makes a ton of sense or it's a good idea. And so I'm going to show you an experiment to conduct whereby you can determine whether Learning Loop can help you or not. And then the second case is you're compelled by it, you're convinced by it, you're like, I want to get started, but I don't know how to start. That's the two cases that we're addressing in this video today. So let's get into case one. So in general with note taking, there are two kinds of people. The first kind of person has taken a bunch of notes before and has probably this big old junk drawer full of notes, and it's difficult to search through, and it's difficult to find anything, and everything they've ever written is functionally lost to the eternities because it's too huge and it's too unwieldy. And that person is going to say, do I need to organize all those notes in order to start Learning Loop? And I would say, no, you don't need to start by organizing all the notes that you've ever taken. I would actually ignore every single note that you've ever taken besides the ones that you currently use to solve your problems now. So I have a friend who has this note called Truisms that he reviews every single morning to remind himself of his highest order values and principles that he lives by in life. So one is romanticize a simple, wholesome life. Another one is fight drugs with pain. And he reads through this list and he reminds himself of these principles every single day, and that's useful to him. So I would say, okay, you can bring that note into your practice of Learning Loop. But everything else, I would just leave it. I just ignore it, because the vast majority of those notes have to do with old problems that you're not really wrestling with anymore, probably. And it's also just such an overwhelming task to go through all the notes that you've ever taken and organize them. Nobody has time for that. Learning Loop takes some time, and I think it's really worth it, but nobody has time to go through all your old notes. No, you're not going to do that. So anyways, there are some notes that you already might be using. You might have a quarterly plan that you consult when you're trying to make your weekly plan, or when you're trying to decide what to do on a Tuesday afternoon. You might have a recipe list that you use to decide what to make for dinner that night. You might have a list of your favorite books that you read through when you're feeling confused, or when you want a little bit of direction, or when you want to recommend books to other people, or whatever. You might have a list of favorite books. You might have a list of things you want to try doing in your city. These are useful notes. And if you use a note, feel free to bring it into Learning Loop. So if you're a note taker, then you have, some small set of notes that you currently use to solve your problems. And that's your starting point. I have my principles. I have my list of favorite books. Okay, what now, Chris? Well, this brings me to the second step of getting started with Learning Loop that applies to everybody, even the other kind of person that doesn't take notes currently. It's pretty easy for them to get started with Learning Loop because there's no baggage from any past note-taking systems. In either case, my recommendation is pretty simple. You set aside an hour, you turn off your phone or your notifications, you tell everybody that might contact you during that hour that you're going to be busy during that hour, and then you start a timer. And you're not done until the timer runs out. And during that hour, you write down the top 5 problems that you struggle with in life. It doesn't have to be actually the top 5 problems, but 5 important problems that you'd like to solve in your life. The problem can be not liking your job. It can be that you want to find a boyfriend or a girlfriend. It can be that you're struggling in your marriage. It can be that you want to have a more rewarding spiritual practice. It can be that you want to get in shape. It can be anything, any problem that you want to solve. Now, for each of those problems, hypothesize solutions to them. So, if you're struggling at work, you're kind of what would make me feel better at work? What do I like about my job? What do I not like about my job? Is there a way to do more of what I like about my job and not do what I don't like about my job? Do less of what I don't like about my job? Is there a way for me to use AI to do less of what I don't like about my job? Is there a way to ask my boss if I can, shift the time that I come in because I like taking a walk in the morning and that's going to put me in a better mood for the day? It could be a million different things, but these are solutions to the problem of I don't like my job. And you're going to write those solutions, these candidate solutions. They're really like hypotheses or things that you suppose work because you've seen them work in the past, or because you read a podcast because you heard a podcast about it, or something. You're gonna write down those solutions underneath the problem of, I wish I could like my job. And that's what you have. You have a problem and you have some candidate solutions, some ideas of something to try. And you do that for all 5 of these problems. You take an hour to do that. Now that you've written down your problems and your pains, and you've written solutions underneath those problems and pains, and this could be on like an index card, it could be in your notes app, it could be in a Google Doc, it could be anywhere. Doesn't matter. It just needs to be a thing that you can look at later when you need to make decisions about how to act and how to think. So now you have this sheet, you have this note, and it has problems and it has solutions. And now over the course of the next month, the hour is done. You finished the hour, you celebrated, you rewarded yourself with a little truffle or a little gummy worm. Now over the course of the next month, you're going to take that note, and every time you run up against those problems, that set of 5 problems, you're going to consult the solutions that you wrote underneath that problem. And you're going to try them. If you decided, I want to make my days better at work by taking a walk at lunch to see if my afternoons dragged less, then you're going to try that. And then when you use that note to try to solve your problems, you're going to write a little date and time at the bottom of the note saying, I tried to make my job better by doing that thing that I said above, of taking a walk at lunch, and it went really well. My afternoon, I felt so much better. I felt so much more energetic. Or you're going to say, that didn't really work. At the end of the month, then, you're going to have as many reflections on what worked as times that you used the note. And so hopefully you'd have 30, 40, 50 reflections on whether this set of problems and solutions worked for you to get you out of bad habits of thinking and action and into good habits of thinking and action. This is a test for whether that will actually work to solve action and thinking problems. And then if it didn't work, congratulations, you proved me wrong. Learning Loop's not for you. But if it did work, then you might be like, ooh, there is something here to Learning Loop. Which brings us to the second case of why you might be on this video, which is that you're already sold. That you already want to try Learning Loop, but you don't know exactly how to start, or you don't know what the process looks like to write down wisdoms, organize them, and then use them. Well, here's the process. Every day, as often as you think of it, as often as it occurs to you, you write down things that seem to matter, resonances, ideas about how to solve a problem you regularly deal with, reframings of situations that you prefer to some other framing that might be natural or habitual to you, realizations about what you do and don't want in a job, or what you do and don't want in a relationship. And you just do this throughout the day, as often as they occur to you. 6 a.m., 11 a.m., 12:30 in the middle of a meeting. Just jot down things that seem to be meaningful and that seem to resonate. Then once a day, you go through your notes and you look at the things you wrote down and you say, okay, I thought that this would be useful to a future me earlier today. What future me needs to see this? Where would I put this so that the version of me that needs this will find it? And that's how you do your organization. So for example, if I write down that a solution to feeling sleepy in the afternoon is to go on a walk at lunch, then I might have a note titled sleepy/tired. And that note is, we could call that like a problem note or a problem page, because it has to do with solving a problem of feeling sleepy and tired because you don't like that. Then anytime I'm sleepy, I might open that problem note. I might open sleepy/tired, and I might get reminded in a subsection of that note called solutions that this one day I went on a walk for 15 minutes after lunch and I felt great for the rest of the afternoon. So in this case, I would have written down, wow, I just went on a walk and I feel so much more alert. That's the wisdom. That's the connection. And then I put it in the sleepy/tired page. That's the organization. And then 3 weeks later, when I'm feeling sleepy and tired, I would look for that problem page in my notes. I'd find it, and then I'd get reminded of this idea to take a 15-minute walk because I might have forgotten it over the course of the 3 weeks. Sue me. I forget things over the course of 3 weeks. So that's an example where you write a note and you put a wisdom in a problem page. But there are also other kinds of pages. There are process pages. Like I have a morning routine that I do every single morning, and I've put steps in there that work to get me kind of like focused and oriented for the day. And so that's a process page. Or you might have a project page where, like I'm running this podcast. It's a project. I have certain outcomes that I want out of it. I want to meet more people that think like this. And so, I have a project page where I have goals of the project and ideas for subsequent episodes of the podcast. And it has all the things relevant to the project that I don't want to forget. But every time I write down a wisdom that pertains to the podcast, I would put it in that page so that I find it when I look at the page. But this is just what I do. I mean, this whole like problem page, process page, question page, person page, this is just what I do. And for you, again, I'll return to what functional learning loop looks like. Functional learning loop looks like you're using notes in order to remind yourself of things that you would have otherwise forgotten in order to act and think better in the future. And then you're using those notes in order to act and think better. That's what it is. So whatever works for you. So while you're doing this organization in the middle of the day, at the end of the day that I just told you to do, beware of a thinking trap. Beware of a pitfall that everything needs to be organized. This is a huge time suck and stressor that held me back at the beginning of my learning loop journey because I would go through every note that I wrote that day and I would be like, oh, like where do I put this note? I'm so confused on what it means, or I'm so confused on why it matters. Skip those. Skip those confusing notes. You don't need those notes. The only notes that you need to log are the ones that resonate with you and are clearly solve a problem that you're facing. It's not a problem if you lose these notes every once in a while. The thing that matters is that you're going through and you're finding the most obvious resonant solutions to your problems and organizing those and making those findable to the future you. And then as you use the notes in order to solve your problem, sometimes you're going to look for a solution to a problem in a note and it's not going to be there. In that case, you might want to make a page representing that problem. And then in the future, when you write wisdoms that are relevant to that problem, you now have a place to put it. But I mean, the general rule here, and what you can take comfort in, is that the more intense a problem is, the more easy it's going to be to recognize a wisdom that solves that problem. And the more often you use the note that represents that problem, the more quickly you're going to be able to find it to put the wisdoms that are relevant for solving that problem in the place where you'll be able to find them in the future. So what you have out the other end of this process is every day you're writing down notes on things that resonate with you, things you want to remember. Then once a day, you're putting those notes where you'll be able to find them in the future. You're being outcome oriented and you're thinking, what problem is this going to solve? Or in what process am I going to need to find this wisdom in the future? And then lastly, whenever you face a problem or whenever you have a question, you consult your notes to find the wisdom that the past you put down for you. So zooming back out, if you're not compelled by Learning Loop, then you can try that first experiment of 5 problems and solutions for a month. Reflect on how it goes when you try to use those solutions to solve those problems. And then 30 days later, evaluate whether the experiment worked or not, whether this felt like a waste of time or whether it felt high leverage. And then probably some people are going to do that experiment. They're going to find Learning Loop's not for them. Learning Loop's not for everybody. It's for the people who struggle to remember what they want to remember in the moments that they want to remember it. And that they achieve that remembering by reading a note that they've written to themselves. So some of those people are going to drop off after that. And some of those people are going to say, this is actually pretty compelling. I actually like that exercise. And then those people can kind of graduate to the next step of the learning loop by saying, okay, I want to try doing this not just with the 5 problems, but I want to do this kind of organically for all of the things that occur to me. And so every day, I'm going to write down the things that matter to me and that stick out and that resonate. And then I'm going to organize those things one time a day into where they ought to go so that I can find them in the future when I need them. And then the third thing is I'm actually going to use those notes to solve my problems. I'm going to expect that solutions to my problems are in those notes and answers to my questions are in those notes. And I'm going to look through them. And if you get lost in the notes, then you know that you can work on your organization skills. And if you're spending too much time organizing the notes at the end of every day, you know that maybe you need to set like a 15-minute timer and you choose the highest leverage notes to organize and ignore the rest of them. That's also a fine thing to do and something that I currently do. I only spend 15 minutes a day logging these notes or organizing these notes for the future me. So I don't know if I've left anything unclear, but this to me seems like a very actionable, practical, straightforward way to start with Learning Loop and to try out whether what I'm saying is nonsense or there's something there. And I would love, as Chris, I would love to hear your experience putting these principles into practice. I would love to hear whether this feels like a huge waste of time. I'd love to hear whether it worked for you. I'd love to hear if you think that I'm thinking of this all wrong or framing it wrong. I'd love to hear from you on your reactions to these ideas. So please DM me, text me, comment, whatever, because I want to hear your experience with these experiments. But you're gonna do great. You're gonna get up. You're gonna get out there, and you're gonna get them. I believe in you, and you should believe in you, and you will believe in you as you do Learning Loop.